So you want to own a hot air balloon business. You buy a balloon, you take people up in the basket, they pay for the view, you land, you do it again tomorrow. Simple product, simple loop, weather permitting. Wake up before sunrise, inflate the envelope, load your passengers, drift over the countryside for an hour, pop some champagne on landing, collect the money, repeat. That's the mental picture almost everyone starts with. That picture was a lie. The average commercial hot air balloon in the US costs somewhere between $40,000 and $70,000 just to get in the air for the first time, and most operators cancel between 30% and 50% of their bookings before a single passenger ever climbs into the basket. Some operators in windier regions cancel closer to 60% of flights in a given month. So here's the real question nobody asks. How does a business that gets canceled half the time still make money at all? How do you build a company around a product you can't actually deliver more than half the time you promise it? Zoom out and the range gets stranger. You can buy a used basic 4-person balloon rig for around $25,000. Envelope, basket, and burner, nothing fancy, patched a few times, sold by a retiring hobbyist pilot. Meanwhile, a shaped advertising balloon, the kind built to look like a beer bottle, a cartoon character, or a corporate mascot for a sponsor, can run past $150,000 before it ever touches a festival field, and some custom shapes commissioned for major brands have cost well over $200,000 once you include design, fabrication, and certification. On one end, you've got a hobbyist flying friends on weekends for the cost of a used car. On the other end, you've got a rolling billboard worth more than most houses. And it's not just the balloon itself that spans that range. The businesses built around them do too. A one-person operator running a single balloon out of the back of a pickup truck might gross $60,000 a year and call it a solid side income. A large regional operator running a fleet of 6 or 7 balloons with full-time crew and year-round advertising contracts can push past $1 million in annual revenue, even though every single flight they run still uses the exact same fabric and fire technology the Montgolfier brothers demonstrated in France back in 1783. Same basic technology, fabric, a wicker or composite basket, a propane burner, but wildly different economics depending on who's writing the check and why. And sitting right in the middle of that gap is the actual commercial ride business, the one that has to somehow turn a fragile, weather-dependent, one-passenger load at a time experience into a repeatable income stream that survives 12 months of unpredictable skies. That's the tension this whole video is going to untangle. So where does the money actually go? Let's start with the hidden cost structure because this is where the naive picture falls apart first. The envelope, that's the actual fabric balloon part, the big colorful bag everyone pictures when they think hot air balloon, typically costs $25,000 to $45,000 new, depending on size and shape complexity. It's not a one-time purchase, even though it feels like it should be. Balloon fabric is nylon or polyester coated to handle heat and UV exposure, and it degrades every single time it's inflated and exposed to sunlight. Most commercial envelopes need replacing every 500 to 1,000 flight hours, which for an active operator running daily summer flights works out to roughly every 3 to 5 years. That's a $30,000+ recurring bill quietly hiding inside what looks, to an outsider, like a single upfront purchase you make once and forget about. The basket and burner system adds another $15,000 to $25,000 on top of the envelope, and unlike the fabric, the metal components don't wear out on a fixed schedule. They wear out based on use, weather exposure, and how carefully the pilot treats the equipment. Burners specifically need regular rebuilds, valve seals degrade, pilot lights fail, fuel hoses crack from heat cycling, and that maintenance runs a few $1,000s a year even for a well-kept rig. Skip it and you're not saving money, you're borrowing against a future failure at 2,000 feet. Then there's propane, the fuel that actually makes the whole thing work. A single 1-hour flight burns through 15 to 20 gallons of propane, and at commercial bulk rates, that's roughly $60 to $100 in fuel for one ride alone. Do 3 flights a day during peak season, a common schedule for operators trying to maximize a good weather window, typically 1 flight at sunrise, 1 at midday if conditions allow, and 1 at sunset. You're spending $200+ a day just on gas before you've paid a single employee, before insurance, before anything else. Multiply that across a genuinely active 6-month flying season, and propane alone can add up to well over $15,000 a year for a single balloon operation, a cost that scales directly with how many rides you actually manage to complete, rather than how many you book. And here's the part almost nobody thinks about when they picture this business: the chase crew. A hot air balloon can't just land wherever it wants. It has no engine, no steering wheel. It goes wherever the wind decides to take it. So every single flight needs a dedicated ground team following along in a truck with a trailer, tracking the balloon by radio, ready to pack up the entire rig wherever it happens to come down. Sometimes that's a designated field. Sometimes that's a stranger's backyard. Sometimes that's 20 miles from the launch site down a dirt road the truck driver has never seen before. That's 2 to 3 paid crew members per flight minimum, plus a dedicated vehicle and trailer, plus fuel for that vehicle, plus, and this is the detail that surprises people most, a small cash tip or apology gift for the landowner whose cow pasture or backyard vegetable garden just became an unscheduled landing zone. Experienced operators actually carry small bottles of champagne or wine specifically to hand to bewildered property owners, a tradition that goes back over 2 centuries to the earliest days of ballooning in France, when pilots needed to reassure terrified farmers that the strange object falling from the sky wasn't a threat. None of that shows up when you picture a balloon business in your head. All of it shows up on the balance sheet every week. Layer on top of that commercial liability insurance, which for passenger-carrying balloon operations typically runs $5,000 to $10,000 a year at minimum and can climb significantly higher depending on claims history and passenger capacity. Add FAA operating certificates and inspections, mandatory pilot medical exams and currency requirements, meaning pilots have to log a minimum number of flights within rolling time windows just to remain legally allowed to fly passengers, and storage or hangar costs for the off-season, when the balloon isn't flying but still needs somewhere dry and temperature-controlled to sit. And then there's a cost most people never even think to ask about: the ground vehicle fleet. That cheese truck isn't a regular pickup you already own. It needs to be sized and rated to tow a loaded trailer carrying a folded envelope that can weigh 300 to 500 pounds, plus a basket, plus fuel tanks. A used truck and trailer combination suitable for this job runs $20,000 to $40,000 on its own. And like any commercial vehicle, it needs its own insurance, its own maintenance, its own fuel budget separate from the balloon's propane. Add radio equipment for crew communication during chase, GPS tracking gear so the ground team can actually find the balloon once it's drifted out of sight over tree lines, and basic safety gear like harnesses and fire extinguishers that need periodic replacement and certification. Add all of that up, and that simple picture of buy balloon, fly people, collect money has quietly turned into a business with 6 or 7 separate recurring cost centers, all ticking along in the background before a single ticket is even sold. So, how does anyone make this pay? Let's break down the revenue side, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. There isn't just one income stream propping up this business. There are 4, and they behave completely differently from each other in terms of stability, seasonality, and risk. The first source is scenic passenger rides. This is the obvious one, the one everybody pictures. Customers pay $200 to $350 per person for a sunrise flight, typically lasting 45 minutes to an hour, often paired with a small champagne toast on landing as a nod to that same old French ballooning tradition. It's steady-ish demand across the warmer months, but it's also the single most weather-fragile revenue stream in the entire business because wind above roughly 10 miles per hour or unstable morning air grounds the flight entirely. No exceptions, no negotiating with physics. The second source is advertising and sponsorship. Companies pay to have their branding painted or stitched onto a balloon envelope, and elite-shaped balloons, the giant sneakers, the beer bottles, the cartoon mascots, command sponsorship deals worth tens of thousands of dollars a year because a giant floating logo photographed drifting over a city of sunrise is a genuine marketing asset, not just a joyride. Companies like Bacardi and various regional beer brands have sponsored shaped balloons at festivals for exactly this reason. The photo opportunity alone is worth more than the flight itself. This income stream is far more stable than passenger revenue because it's contracted annually, agreed in advance, and paid regardless of how many actual flights happen that year. The third source is festival appearance fees. Events like the Albuquerque International Balloon Festival pay individual pilots to bring their balloons and simply be part of the spectacle, sometimes covering travel costs and lodging on top of a flat appearance fee. This is lump sum, seasonal income, concentrated into a few weeks a year rather than spread evenly across 12 months, which means a single good festival season can matter more to an operator's annual bottom line than 3 months of regular passenger flights combined. The fourth source is private charters, marriage proposals, anniversaries, corporate team building events, where operators charge a significant premium, often double the standard per-seat rate, because the customer isn't just buying transportation into the sky, they're buying a story, a moment, something they'll tell people about for the rest of their lives. That emotional premium is real money, and savvy operators lean into it hard, building entire packages around proposal flights specifically, complete with a photographer stationed on the ground, a hidden ring box built into the champagne toast, and a video crew capturing the reaction, all bundled into a single invoice that can run into the thousands of dollars for what is, mechanically, the exact same hour of flight time as a regular scenic ride. There's actually a fifth stream too, smaller but worth mentioning: merchandise and photography. Operators who fly at high-profile festivals often sell prints, branded apparel, and framed photos of their specific balloon to spectators on the ground who never even flew, essentially monetizing the balloon as a visual spectacle rather than a transportation product. It's a modest stream on its own, but for a shaped advertising balloon with a recognizable design, it can add several $1,000s a year in pure margin, since the balloon was already going to be inflated and photographed regardless. 4 income streams, 4 completely different risk profiles. One fragile and daily, dependent entirely on the morning's wind speed. One stable and annual, locked in by contract regardless of weather. One concentrated and seasonal, living or dying on a handful of festival weekends, and one premium priced and occasional, cashing in on emotion rather than scenery. Balance all 4 intelligently, and a small operator can survive a genuinely rough month of bad weather. Rely on just one, say passenger rides alone, and a single bad summer of high winds can wipe out the entire season's profit before it even really begins.